Hello everyone, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from, and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. Used not to believe in horror stories. Thought they were all bullshit people created to scare the crap out of each other. But let me tell you, when it catches up with you, when you're in some actual messed up that's when you realize horror ain't no movie cliche. It's real. And it's scary. It was one of those nights. One of those nights when the wind is howling in the crevices and the shadows are falling a fraction of a second longer than they should. I was home by myself, which wasn't actually that unusual. My parents had gone off for the weekend, so I was the only one in the house. It was wonderful at first. Pizza brought in, PlayStation lit up, lights low enough to set the mood. But there was something off. I attributed it to my first. Maybe I was reading too much into it. You know how your mind plays tricks on you when you're alone. But then the things began to pile up. The creak of the stairs upstairs while I was lounging in the living room. The creak of the back door when I knew darn well that I had closed it. The air was thick, heavy, like something had been lying there, breathing, waiting just recently. Shaked it, told myself I gotta have been tripping, and then the phone started ringing. One new message. No matter what, do not look outside. From unknown numbers. My stomach fell. My arms were outstretched on the screen as my heart was racing. First thing in my head, some terrible joke. One of my friends messing with me. But something about it, the way these words had been spoken, so cold and statement-like, it did not sound like a joking tone. I gulped a hard one when I chose to ignore the warning, and went ahead to peek through my front door anyway. I peeked through my peephole, and that is when the blood in my veins turned stiff. There was someone standing in front of my driveway entrance, stiffly stiff as a damn statue, black head to toe, hoodie up over the head, just standing, not walking around, not swaying at all, just standing and staring at my house. I stepped back, my pounding heart. Maybe they will go away. Maybe they were just a passerby. But the longer I stay there, the more I can sense that creeping feeling of being followed. Another buzz. Don't look outside again. Right. I lost it then. Whoever they were, they knew I had seen. Blind eyes crawled under my skin like they tunneled in every direction inside me. Double-locked the doors. I triple-checked them. Was holding a kitchen knife because, for goodness sake, I was not going to be one of those incoherently screaming horror movie victims. And the knocking. Not frantic, not pounding. Just slow, rhythmic. Knock, knock, knock. I gripped the knife in my hand, gasping for air. My whole instinct was to do nothing. But my idiot curiosity would not let me alone, as if I had never heard the sound. I slowly retreated back into the peephole, each step creaking out into the rest of the house. But when I looked, nothing. There was no one there. I breathed out, a trembling, frightened sort of relief washing over me. Maybe they'd left. Maybe it was all some sort of mad joke. Then the phone rang once more, the third time. Don't move. He's watching you. My heart leaped in my chest. I didn't budge. Couldn't. But I knew. That sensation. The feeling that something, someone, was standing behind me, close enough to touch, close enough to feel my heart racing in my chest. I attempted to run. I attempted to spin and slash at the knife, but my body would not listen. I was immobile, held up by something greater than fear. And then the mood in the room changed, like something had swiveled. Not a lot, but enough so that I could feel the change. I ran. I waited. I thought. I just sprinted up the stairs and hurled myself into my room. My fingers fisted in a struggle to call 911, but my phone screen went black before I'd even gotten a chance to dial. Dead. And then, I heard it. A whisper. Outside my door, low and gravelly, scraping over quiet like claws over a lid. I see you. I jammed my hand into the side of my face so that I couldn't let loose with the scream building in me. I was shaking, backsliding with wetness. The doorknob groaned, feeling hesitantly and cautiously around the lock. And silence. I wasn't breathing. I wasn't moving. A minute, at least, or so it felt. And then, steps. Heavy, thudding footfalls from far, far away. I pushed against that door with my body until morning light. I did not sleep. I never even allowed myself to shut my eyes. And when morning was finally upon us, I crept downstairs, still dazed with heart. The house was silent. Too silent. And the front door, still shut. But on the floor, in the center of my living room, was my phone. Off. Rolled up neatly in a pile. And on the floor next to it, a piece of paper with a note. Next time, listen. I never slept in at home again alone after that. I shouldn't have ever taken that idiot shortcut. It was late one night and I had just left partying at my buddy's place. I wasn't drunk, just had a few too many to be a little loose. I'd normally be on the main road, floodlights, with not a lot of traffic whizzing by late at night. That evening, however, I had to hurry. Shortening the trip by cutting through the woods would save at least 20 minutes. 20 minutes, less time in the cold. Naturally, I took it. The way wasn't actually much, rather a narrow, dusty path hacked through trees that seemed 100 times taller at night. An actual path, but occasionally trod by man. Never finished. Too dark, too quiet. And with that uncanny feeling, the trees were tracking you. My goosebump on my arm was forgotten, and I just kept walking, arms stuck deep in pockets, shoulders bunched up against cold. Around 5 minutes in, something was off. Not like paranoid or that familiar, I'm in the dark by myself feeling. It was other. The silence was too dense. No wind, no leaves, no crickets. Even my steps were muted. That's when I heard it. The air stank. Something was rotting. Something was still. I had initially thought that it could be an animal that had died somewhere near us, but the odor was strong. It tore its way down my throat, knotted my stomach. My stomach was pleading with me to turn back, but I chastised myself for being a fool. Just go straight. It's a straight line across. Then, I heard them. Footsteps. Not mine. They were behind me, silent but insistent. Close enough that I was certain they were not from some different route. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. Just the trees, the darkness closing in over the path behind. I hastened my pace, assuring myself it was an animal. Maybe a stray dog, maybe a deer. But deep inside, I knew better. I wasn't alone. There was a limb that had come loose to my left. Too close. I looked sideways and, briefly, I saw something. A shadow. Tall, thinner. Too white against the blackness, skin pulled taut over bone. No face, just a resemblance to something. Off. I propelled my legs harder, half running now. I was not going to fall victim to some sort of horror movie crap. Just needed to get through the trees. The rhythm of the footsteps became faster too. God's honest truth, they were behind me. No gasping, no shuffling, just the thud of feet on pavement, just behind me. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I couldn't run. Running was panic, and panic made people do stupid things. I kept walking, straining but unyielding, every hair on my body standing on end. Then it whispered. My name. Not a yell. Not a scream. But a whisper. So low it was barely audible. Sliding through the trees like fingertips stroking the skin at the back of my neck. My blood ran cold. Nobody was supposed to be aware that I'd been here. Nobody was supposed to know my name. I kept walking with my eyes ahead of me, my attention focused on the gap in the trees where the streetlights would be, and something caught at my hoodie. Not tight. Hard enough only to tug the fabric like pricking fingers exploring the material. I lost it, ran off ahead, running for life. The footsteps boomed behind me, pounding in the ground, heavier, faster. I did not even look back. I just ran, searing lungs, shrieking muscles. That foul smell thickened, clogging nostrils, searing in my eyes. Then, nothing. As if a body had been frozen dumb to the world. No wind, no step, no breath. I did not break. I did not stop. I skidded through the trees into the street so hard that I nearly staggered. My foot struck pavement, and sound returned. Cars in the distance, yapping dog. Ordinary things, safe things. I looked back. Nothing. Leaning trees and the streetlights only. The road behind me was empty, but I knew what I'd heard. I knew what I'd felt. I waited there, panting, for something to come out of the woods, but nothing moved. No whispers. That should have been the end of it. But later that night in my apartment, I caught a whiff of it again. That smell. Distant, but there. And just when I was beginning to drift off, my mind at last relaxing into sleep, I heard it again. A minute breath, against my ear, saying my name. I don't cut corners anymore. I never considered myself to be a superstitious individual. Ghosts, devils, the supernatural. So much nonsense, all rubbish, myth to scare children. But since last winter, I am enlightened. There are certain things that emerge at night, waiting patiently for that moment when they will emerge again. And sometimes they do not want to stay on the outside. Sometimes they find a way in. It started when I leased a new apartment. No major deal. 1 bedroom, 3rd floor of a small apartment complex in the suburbs. Low rent, nice neighbors, and best of all, mine. My apartment. First time I ever had anything to call my own. The week was a letdown. Work, apartment, sleep, do it again. I was home at night in bed and at the movies later at night and video games at home, just relaxing with this break. And on the 8th night, something else caught my eye. I was brushing my teeth and I caught a glimpse out of the corner of my eye. My bathroom had this small window, out into the back alleyway behind my building. It was that high up in the air, not a sill, not a fire escape. Glass panel, too small to make a body fit. And I am certain that I did see a face. Toothpaste rolled on my lips, racing heart, I stood there. The face was there, and suddenly it was not. My head was unable to decide what I was seeing. An illusion? A ghost? I waved the mirror away with my hand and scowled once again out the window. Nothing. I teased myself away from the fear. But I never did look out the window the rest of the night. I was getting glimpses the following 2 days, always in the corner of my vision. A flash and then disappear. A silhouette when I turned to look. It was unclear at first, but on the 3rd night I could no longer avoid it. Something, a human presence, was hovering outside my window. I reminded myself it was not possible. I had the 3rd floor apartment. No balcony, no ledge. But as I was climbing into bed that evening, a knocking resounded through my apartment. Slow, deliberate knuckle knock-knock against the glass. I did not shift. I did not breathe. My belly hardened into a tight, hard knot as I tried to peer in the direction of the bathroom. The bathroom door was ajar, creaking into the black room. And within that creak, I glimpsed it. A white, spectral face against the glass. Its face was ill-gray, its eyes sunken and black. No mouth. Only a wide, silent scream of a mouth, its lips erased. The creature looked at me straight out, remained impossibly rigid. I couldn't move, couldn't even blink. Horror froze my body, froze it. It smiled. My eyes were blurry as I was frightened. I jumped up from the bed and ran into the bathroom and turned on the light switch. The window was empty. The alley downstairs was empty. I was there, standing with my face against the glass, panting. Did I just see that? Am I going crazy? The next morning I called my landlord. I told him that someone had been in my window. He was not bothered. No way, he said back to me. Not if they can fly. I asked him if anybody ever actually did live in my building complex, if anything ever happened. He thought about it. Then a raspy rasp in his throat. He kind of whispered there was some guy who used to live here before. A loner. Alone. One night he jumped out the window. 3rd floor. Dead the second he hit. I dropped it without him saying anything else. I left all the lights in the house on that night. I attempted to sleep, but as soon as I got into bed, that face appeared. Those hollow cheeks. The grimace grin. At 3 a.m., I got into bed unsteady. I was awakened by gentle, insistent knocking. Knock, knock, knock. My body was paralyzed. The knocking was not in the bathroom. It was at my bedroom window. I'm on the 3rd floor. No ledge, no balcony, nothing. And the knocking persisted, and it was continual, relentless. I moved my head, hoping for what I'd see. He was there. Same empty face pressed against the glass. But he wasn't smiling then. His face had changed, angry, as if he'd discovered that I'd attempted to bluff him out of truth, as if he'd been expecting me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then the glass began to creak, the crack of the sound down the length of the window pane. My heart was pounding so violently that it would burst. And then, silence. The figure disappeared. I spent the remainder of the night trembling in the corner of my bedroom, all of my lamps in my apartment. The intruder through my window was gone by morning as if it never happened. I left that day. I packed up everything. I took furniture, clothes, the whole 9 yards. I moved downtown, leased a new apartment, and never looked back. Months passed now and I never did see him again. And yet, whenever at midnight I always hear it knock, knock, knock. I never begrudged the opportunity to go back into the woods for the weekend. There was an enchantment that hung over the peacefulness of the trees, the pinging mountain air, and the prettiness of solitude. When my buddy Jason asked me if I would come along with him on a communal remote cabin out in the middle of the woods on an overnight excursion, I didn't flinch. We had also extended an invitation to friends Mark and Sarah to accompany us, hoping this would be just the right moment to withdraw from the world and unwind. The ride to the cabin had been less stressful than I'd anticipated. When we'd exited the interstate and deeper into the woods, the roads decreased in size and the road was dusty. Trees drew closer, branches above casting dark, overarching shadows in the sunlight. We'd arrived at the cabin before the sun still lingered above the trees, shining through its final burst. The cabin itself was rural comfort. It was 1 story with a tiny kitchen and living area and a fieldstone fireplace. We'd been assured by the owner that there was electricity and running water, but our cell phone signal on our phones was 0. Not that we minded. It was what we were going to do anyway. And as we were getting comfortable and clearing the room, Sarah commented on this odd thing to say. There were a number of locks on the front door, more than you normally have. Deadbolts, chain, and even a bit of wood to stuff into it to jam it closed. Jason dismissed this as some neurotic owner's idiosyncrasy. We ate, and we drank, and slept afterwards. Jason and Mark slept in the room on the left, and I slept in the room on the right with Sarah. It was appallingly, silently quiet, the kind of quiet which makes every little noise all the more dramatic. The wind sweeping through the branches, the wood creaking at times. It all had to be amplified by the silence. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I awoke to the gentle scratching. At first I thought it was an animal at the door, but when I sat up and listened carefully, the scratching was deliberate. Gentle, persistent scratching on the front door. Raced hard in my chest. I glanced over at Sarah, who slept. I did not wake her, but entered into the living room. The fire had burned down to coals glows in the fireplace and cast rhythmic shadows across the walls. The scratching remained. I waited for 1 minute and then checked through the peephole in the door. Nothing. I breathed deeply, attempting to calm down. Perhaps it was a limb striking the cabin due to the wind. I was attempting to roll over in order to roll into bed when there was an ear-splitting crash on the door that was so loud unexpectedly. I was frightened. Something, and perhaps somebody, was responsible for it. I rushed to Jason and Mark's room and shook Jason. "There's someone outside," I breathed urgently. Mark rolled over and groaned, but Jason came to life straight away. He took a flashlight and crept up to the door with me in stealth. We stood there. The quiet was stifling. Jason very gradually opened the door, severing the beam into the darkness. The beam pierced through the vacant porch, the trees whispering quietly into the darkness. Nothing. No noise. No track. We were too close, and then shut the door firm, invoking locks and chains. We would not disturb Sarah and Mark in the morning. There was no need to unnecessarily alarm them. The next day we went up, trying to make up for the unpleasantness of the previous night. The wood was beautiful but impossible, the large trees casting dark shadows that hid most of the sun. We did get it inconvenient enough to be lost, though a fairly well-marked trail was ahead of us. Halfway through our trek, we stumbled over something that gave us the shudders. A torn tent, the fabric torn and frayed. Torn clothes, a broken lantern, and what appeared to be claw marks on the tree trunks that circled us, scattered the ground. Sarah shivered. Maybe a bear ripped it apart, she surmised, although she doubted it herself. Jason stepped forward, staring at the ground. No animal tracks, though, just human prints. But they're odd, like someone walking with dragging feet. I shivered. Something was wrong with me. We went back, the weight of foreboding hanging over us. There was tension under that night in the cabin. We tried to laugh at it and keep things light, but we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I woke up at 2 a.m. again. No scratching this time. Whispering. Soft, scratchy whispering just outside the cabin. My stomach twisted in horror. I woke up Sarah and called her for quiet. We two were there with our jaws hanging open. The whispers grew louder, room by room. Jason and Mark had experienced it too since their door creaked open, and Jason walked out into the hall, his eyes wide with fright. He motioned for us to be silent. The whispers ceased at once, and frantic pounding on the windows. We all screamed. Jason had grasped the poker, Mark had grasped a kitchen knife, and Sarah was holding onto my arm for dear life. The thumping increased, thundering from window to window as if whatever or whoever was pounding around and trying to find every conceivable point of entry. And then, just as abruptly as it had started, it ceased. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. With the early morning time, we frantically packed up and took off. The trip home was forebodingly silent, all of us thoroughly dazed enough to converse. Jason phoned the cabin owner late one evening to inform him of what had happened. The owner listened in silence until Jason breathed. "You're not the first," he told him. "That's why there are so many locks on the doors." He continued to explain that strange things had been occurring in and around said location for decades. Hikers disappearing, campers waking up in the middle of the night to the whispering in their ear of some unknown entity, and phantom images seen on the periphery of the woods. We never did determine who or what was behind that cabin that evening, but I can assure you this much: I'll never be sleeping in a cabin in the woods again. I should be over the moon because we are moving into our new home, a new beginning in a new environment. However, something went very terribly wrong with my family and me, and we found ourselves going through the horror in our dream home in no time. It began on the first night. Sarah and my husband, me lastly, had unloaded the bare essentials, stacking the majority of the boxes into the living room. Our boy Ethan was already sound asleep, all 5 years old of him cozied in his new bedroom. The home was an antique constructed during some time in the 1900s, but they'd pulled some magic and updated it with stunning hardwood flooring, mammoth bay windows, and an enormous backyard and back. Blissful. Until the night. I woke up at 3 a.m. and heard the whispers. I initially thought that Sarah was whispering while sleeping, but when I turned to check on her, she was deep asleep. The whispers were also very quiet, like someone whispering in the wall. I sat up, wondering what it is. The whispers were from the hallway outside Ethan's door. My heart racing, I crept quietly out of bed. The hallway was dark, the wooden floor cold on my naked feet. I stood in Ethan's bedroom doorway and listened harder. A voice, a soft singing voice like a woman singing a lullaby. My blood turned icy. I opened Ethan's door and flipped on the light. He slept, undisturbed. I looked around the room and it was clear of any other human being. I looked under the bed, inside the closet. Nothing. I told myself that it must be my imagination playing a trick on me, the house settling or perhaps wind coming in through an open vent. I wrinkled up my face and crawled back into bed, though I couldn't shake off the crawling inside of me. The subsequent nights it got worse. We would sense the knocking on the walls, the running feet above us in the attic, and crawling shadows that appeared to mislead themselves. Ethan began waking us in the dead of night, sobbing about the lady in the corner. We begged him to describe her to us, and the answer made a chill run down our spines. She has no eyes, just black holes, and she smiles too much. Sarah attempted to dismiss it. "It's a child's fantasy," she said to me. But I wasn't so convinced. I had recorded my phone one evening when we were in bed, in a bid to capture whatever was causing the noise. What I discovered the following morning gave the hair on the back of my neck a stand. Our bedroom radiated with light in the hall by way of the nightlight. The door swung open on its own at 3:07 a.m. Something of undefined form, a tall form, a long form, arms proportionally longer, was standing at the end of the door frame. It didn't shift a hair, didn't even budge one step, and just stood there gazing. The moment my physical form shifted under the covers, the door creaked back into blackness and did not budge. I brought the tape to Sarah and she paled. "We have to get out of here," she wheezed. We couldn't get out though. We'd just purchased the house, spent all our money on it. So we had a priest come in and bless the house. He moved from room to room, muttering prayers, spraying holy water. For 2 days the hubbub subsided, but peace was not to be. Ethan vanished on a single night. We tucked him into bed as we always did, checked on him at 10 p.m., and all was well. Yet we heard him laugh at 2 a.m., out the window. We ran to his room, but it was vacant, blankets scattered on the floor. The window was ajar, though we had closed it when we went to bed. I was frantic. I ran outside, my heart racing. Ethan was standing in the center of the yard, gazing upwards towards the upstairs window. His mouth was still, as though he was in conversation with someone. "Ethan," I shouted, running over to him. He turned around, his expression peaceful to the point of being otherworldly. "She's going to allow me to live with her for all eternity," he whispered. I scooped him up and held him clutched tight against me. Sarah was weeping, her face contorted in shock. After that, we didn't waste any time. Packed bags and off we went, having a shared motel room until we worked out what we were going to do next. A few days afterward, I met one of the neighbors, a homeless woman in her 60s. When I said our house, she scowled. "Where is that house?" she started uncertainly. "Lived there a woman. She was a widow, lost her husband in the war. Say she went mad with sorrow. She started taking in children, orphans, runaways. But they never left. The police arrived one afternoon. They saw dozens of little shoes but no kids. She insisted upon informing them that they were still there, playing among the walls. When they hauled her away, she continued to shout, "They'll never leave me. Never!" My stomach churned. We sold the house for under what we'd bought it for, anxious to get away from whatever lurked inside. Even today I recall the whispers, the dark figure, and the look Ethan had given. So entranced. Certain houses are not to be lived in, and certain spirits never let you go. I like to travel alone. It gives me time to reflect, read, and view the world on my own terms. After one recent trip, though, I've been even more cautious where I end up sleeping. I stayed in an Airbnb one summer in one of these tiny mountain towns. It was this tiny little cabin, rustic and cozy, with huge windows that opened out over a dense forest. The photos on the listing made it seem like the ultimate retreat. The host had great reviews and it was cheap, so I went and rented it for 3 nights. The cabin was just as cute looking in photos as it was when I got there. The owner, Diane, welcomed me. She was late 50-ish, nice but guarded. Something about the way she spoke, so rehearsed, so anxious, kept me on my toes. She gave me a flying tour of cabin, handed over keys, and gave warp speed tour of house rules. No Wi-Fi around here, she smiled. But you did come by to get disconnected, didn't you? I nodded, although I wasn't happy about being completely isolated. But I comforted myself that I made out. I did have my phone, and worst case, I could drive into town and grab a signal. The first night was uneventful. I ate some chow for supper, sat up by the fire and read a book, and then went to bed early. It was nice to be in the peacefulness of the woods, until no longer peaceful. I awoke at 2 a.m. with the sound of footsteps, not in the hallway, in this room. I did not know if I was dreaming or not at first until I heard the sound again. A slow, hesitant creaking on the hardwood floor. I rolled over in bed, bumping my chest against it. I listened intently, my breath trapped in my throat. Nothing. There was silence. I attempted to reach for my phone, but I had no signal. I was feeling sick. I had closed the doors when I slept. I knew that I had closed them. I edged out of bed, and I did not reach for the flashlight that I had been holding. I moved into the hallway, and my bare feet made not a sound whatever on creaking floorboards. The cabin was black with only the moonlight pouring in through the windows. The front door, still locked. The kitchen, vacant. The living room, everything in order. I wondered if perhaps I had dreamed it, or perhaps the cabin was shifting. And then I saw something. One of the dining room chairs had been shoved back from one of the other dining room chairs. I could have sworn I hadn't pushed it that way. My body numbed up. I took a slow step back, spinning my head. Was anyone at home? Had someone been home when I slept? I decided to stay up the remainder of the night with the flashlight and shivering in my clothes on the couch and keeping vigil in the room I was sleeping in. Nothing else happened, but I could not dispel the feeling of suspicion that I was not alone. The next day, I was tired, but chalked it up to paranoia. I hiked all day and tried to dress up as best I could while on vacation. In going back to the cabin, I had rationalized almost completely that I had seen things. I double-checked the locks that night before I went to bed. I even wedged a chair over the front door handle just in case. I then dug into the blankets and prayed for a good night's sleep. It didn't work. At 3:12 a.m. on the nose, I was awakened. Not by noise, but because I knew that someone, or something, was standing over me. I'd drawn the air back into my throat as I leaned against the bedroom door. It was open. I knew, I was sure. I'd closed it when I'd gone to bed. I thundered inside my head as I rocked over in my chair. The corridor on the other side was a tunnel of darkness. I glared into the empty space, and I felt that there was something there. Something lurking. Something waiting. I hunted around for my flashlight, turned it on and shone the light down the hallway. Nothing, but the creepiness was still there. I knew I couldn't stay there another moment. Keys clutched in my hand, I hurried to pack up my things. I didn't care that it was the middle of the night. I just wanted out of the house. When I hit the front door, I saw something that made my veins run cold. The chair I had jammed across the handle had been moved. Not over, not screamed out of. Moved. Something had arrived. I sprang into my car, shifted into high, and wouldn't look. I drove on down to the next town and turned in at a dingy motel and got a room. I called my hostess, Diane, the following day and informed her that I was canceling the visit ahead of schedule. I didn't reveal to her what transpired, but only that I had a family emergency. Her response shocked me. Huh, made it through the night? I just held the telephone in silence. Even today, I do not know who, or what, was sleeping in the cabin with me. All I can say is that I will never be booking an Airbnb by myself again. I just loved having the house to myself. The quiet, the loneliness, being able to do whatever I wanted without someone watching my back and telling me not to, something that I always used to love whenever my parents were going out for the weekend. But tonight, I wish I weren't home alone. It was Friday night. My parents were already gone for the day, off to spend the day with my grandparents, and I remained home alone with the standard orders. Lock the doors, don't sleep in, call me if you need something. I promised them I'd be okay. I'd been looking after myself a million times before and nothing ever happened. I was in for the first 2 hours of couch surf TV, phone gaming, and snacks. My turn. I set the clock to ring at midnight. I closed doors, screened out nearly all light in the hallway, and was headed for bed. I was snuggling into blankets when I heard it. It was a low creaking sound. I accused it first. The house is old. It groans. The settling pipes, the wind, the foundation. But then I heard it do it again. Creak. Louder this time. Closer. I stood stock still, gasping uncomfortably to observe. My head was straight away in alibi mode. Maybe the house is creaking. Maybe I have left a window open and forgotten. But I knew deep inside of my belly that something was not quite right. And then another noise. A tap. Fingers on wood. I'm lying flat in my bed, racing heart. The noise is under. I'm holding my phone, fingers placed on emergency call. Tap, tap, tap. The noise had shifted. It wasn't stagnant anymore, it was in motion, like a finger drawn across someone who had walked across my house. I wished that I was going crazy, but then the unimaginable was spoken. The familiar creak of stairs. Someone was ascending. I was frozen in terror. I crept out of my bed sideways as stealthily as possible to my closet. I shut myself in, leaving the door a hair wider than closed so that I could observe. Kriak. One step closer. I pushed a hand into my face and breathed in deeply, my phone in my hand, the screen quietly illuminating in the darkness of my closet. I thought about calling the police, but what am I going to tell them? I didn't know if it was occurring or not, or perhaps I was losing my mind. Some distant, muffled footsteps on the bottom of my stairs. Whatever it was, now it's in my hallway. There was a presence just beyond my closet door. My bedroom door had been open a little, and I looked. I could only see the shape of a figure, standing in the dim light of the hallway. They didn't move, but I knew they were staring at me, listening. I didn't breathe. Seconds ticked by, and minutes. The silence was excruciating. My body was complaining at the rigidity of being held for so long, but I did not move. Then, from nowhere, a whisper, so soft that I barely even registered it. I see you. My body was rigid with fear. My mind was screaming at me to move away, but I could not. I was frozen with fear. And then, out of the blue, the shadow began to roll, slowly, intentionally. It rolled around, rolling off out into the hall. I heard the boards groaning beneath it as it rolled down the stairs. I crouched over, waiting to hear the sound echo through the blackness below. And then, nothing. Nothing. I'd been in the house for what had seemed like hours. I hadn't emerged until it was morning, just starting to filter through outside my own window. That's when I finally worked up the courage to leave my closet. The rest of the house was in the same state I had left it in before. No open door, no broken windows. There wasn't anything that would make it look as though anyone had ever been inside there. There was one thing, however, which I did recognize. I no longer slept alone in my home. Remaining up all night in a local diner at the side of the road was not the low I had ever reached. Sure, okay, every now and again it was the solitary activity, but the silence was of a benefit. This was until one night I worked in the diner and learned that I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. It was close to 2 a.m. on a cold autumn night. There weren't any other human beings to be found walking in the streets, and the neon outside the diner was a woeful ghost of light in the rolling fog rolling into town off the interstate highway. The refrigerator whirred its low, steady whine as the sole sound in the diner, and every now and again crackle as I had just added some French fries into it. I was alone that night, and the only customer was a truck driver at the end of the counter, getting a cup of coffee. He was one of my regulars, an old man named Dave, who trucked in for supper late after again on the road. I was cleaning off the counter when suddenly the doorbell rang. I looked up, hoping to spot a truck driver or a summer tourist in. But in walked a man who entered dressed in a filthy, frayed coat. Unnatural, mechanical. Machines. Moving with a purpose like machines. Face as pale as death. Eyes black holes tightening my stomach with fear. "Welcome," I said, smiling. "What do you want?" He didn't reply. He simply stood up and walked directly over to the booth, located in the rear of the diner, and sat down, gazing at the empty table in front of him. Dave fidgeted uncomfortably in his seat, cautiously looking at the man. "You okay, buddy?" he bellowed, his booming voice breaking the silence. The man didn't reply. I grabbed a menu and crept over to the man's booth. "Sir, meal or coffee?" His head snapped just barely, but never did his eyes find mine. He simply growled, "It's almost time." I iced. "Time for what?" He said nothing. He just sat there frozen. I looked over at Dave and he slowly shook his head, cringing. Something was amiss. I took a step back, meaning to leave the man in peace. I returned behind the counter, watching him as I gathered up cleaning equipment. But then, in the diner, there was another scene. Ripe air crawled up, and lights over the counter trembled. The whine of the refrigeration motor became a little louder, a little more quivery, as though the whole diner was attempting to hold its breath in anticipation. And then the door chime rang out once more. I turned around again, anticipating another customer, but this time no one stood there. I frowned. The door was shut. Outside, the fog had crept up to cover the glass like a ghostly hand. When I turned around again towards the booth once more, my own breath was caught in my throat. The man vanished. I did not see him stand, did not see him turn and walk away. He had just vanished. Dave slammed down his coffee, his face ashen. "What in the devil was that?" he growled. I was shocked. I approached the booth where the man had sat. My shaking hands reached out to put one on the table, expecting it to be frozen. What I found sent chills through me. On the table, scrawled across it in crooked writing, the message, "He is coming." I leaped back, pounding heart. My stomach was screaming at me to get up and flee, to shut the doors and away. But before I'd even made a start trying to do it, the lights went out. The lone diner, all, was dark. My chest labored with exertion as I struggled to pull my phone, its harsh white light out from under the couch, sending eerie shadows dancing across the walls. Only the faint echo of the wind screaming in the distance. Then, footsteps, slowing, dragging, from the kitchen. I switched on the light in that direction, my racing heart. "Who's there?" Nothing. Dave stood up, his hand in his jacket for something, a pocket knife, I presumed. He was as afraid as I was. And then, out of the corner of my eye, a man. A spindly, thin man on the periphery of the light. My own breathing ceased. It was the man, only when this did his face contort into a grotesque grin, wide beyond the bounds of man. His eyes were empty, pit-like. His arms were unnatural, too long, bending at non-human joints. He approached us. The ground creaked beneath his weight. Then, in front of us, all of us standing there frozen in fear, the lights flickered again, and he was gone. The only clue they left at the diner was the strange, faint laugh, distorted, warbled, echoing all over the diner. I didn't make it through the rest of my shift. I quit that night. Dave never came back either. 2 weeks later, I found a fellow coworker on the same night shift who had also noticed the same man before he disappeared into thin air. I have no idea what that thing was, but I do know one thing for certain: he wasn't human, and he's still out there in hiding, waiting, and sooner or later, he'll be back. I was a pizza delivery driver, so there were freaks I was always having never in short supply. Customers, cruising through town at midnight driving, and the humongous occasional tip which made it worth it and way over and around for. But one evening, yes, I had one encounter that put it in neutral for good when I slammed on the brake and skidded into the side. It was late Friday afternoon, and I was finishing up work on my project when a late order walked in. Delivery was to be in the burbs, which I was not used to. My boss gave me the pizza and the ticket and raised an eyebrow. "Odd," he growled. "I don't think that I ever worked there." I didn't give it a second thought. A delivery was a delivery, and the sooner I could get that over with, the sooner I was home. The bait drew me down a deserted road flanked by despondent trees, whose gnarled branches stretched across the metal moon like macabre fingers. My GPS flickered on and off before landing on the highway, but the more I drove, the more dire my stomach warned me. The houses were less frequent and farther apart, and I was on a dirt road to darkness. I had finally pulled up to a look-you-over stop, a rickety sort of thing about halfway across an empty field. No lights on, no activity, just the soft buzz of insects and the distant hooting of an owl. There was no mail number on the mailbox, no name, like it belonged to no human being at all. I stepped out of my vehicle, pizza in hand, and proceeded toward the porch. The squeaky old wooden floorboards complained under me, and it reeked and was wet, as if something was rotting inside. I knocked on the door. No one answered. I knocked a second time, louder and firmer. "Pizza delivery," I yelled, shaking. There was still no answer. Just as I'd reached the stage of turning my back, the door creaked open. I was assaulted by a frigid slap of air and breathed in whiffs of mold and metal. My skin crawled. I just remained there, then peered inside. The inside was blacker than coal. I could hardly make out the outline of old furniture pieces covered in white Clothex. The room was empty. Was it a prank? Had some teenage hood called the Pizza Inn as a prank? I had been huddled in the pizza box just inside the door, prepared to make a dash, when a whisper. A man, not man, croaky whisper that sent shivers of goosebumps down my skin. "Stay." I tensed to the middle of my body. I spun, pounding heart. The voice was within the house. That is when I saw it. A shadow. A too skinny, too tall figure standing in the far part of the hallway. Ridiculously lean its shape, impossibly elongated its arms, ridiculously titled its head. I couldn't tell where its face was, but I felt eyes on me, cold and blank. My stomach was howling at me to get moving. I stepped back, nearly falling down porch steps, my husky breathing, my shaking hands struggling to find car keys. But as I turned to flee, the door closed behind me. I jumped into my vehicle and closed the doors behind me, the chest rising and falling. My fingers were trembling as I attempted to place the key in the ignition, the engine faltering before it roared to life. As I drove away from the house, I looked back over my shoulder at the residence again. The monster was against the glass, its grotesque face against it. Its jaws were open in a ghastly grin, its lips stretching far wider than any human could possibly have achieved. I floored the accelerator. The road flew by me as I sped into town, my knuckles clenched on the steering wheel. I didn't slow down until I crashed into the door of the pizzeria, panting. My supervisor glared once and scowled. "What is the matter with you?" I mentioned everything: house, voice, shadow. And when he examined the delivery receipt, he lost his color. "No delivery was ever made out of that house," he stated to me. As a matter of fact, that house has been unoccupied for years. I exited that evening. I to this day have no idea what I was dealing with. But every now and then when I'm driving along the road, I can spot a figure in the back of the trees frowning, waiting. And I hope that it never makes another delivery. Even better still, I used to drive late night on empty roads. The quietness everywhere on empty roads, the symphony of noises of the wheels grouching every time I turned on the road, and the occasional look at street lamps on the road was that rush. But all those ended after one experience. I never drive late night alone since then with that crazy, annoying fear in my stomach. It was 1 a.m, and I had just come back from my best friend's house. The road was vacant, curving like a great big black ribbon before me. There were some sporadic stars twinkling in the sky, and the moon hid behind thick clouds. You couldn't hear anything other than the sound of the loud thumping of the engine of my car and the distant low chirping of crickets. Perhaps a pleasant 20 minutes of driving, I spotted something strange. A guy standing off on the road, hardly in sight in my headlight. Sure, my head was playing tricks on me for 2 minutes, I suppose. But creeping up on him slow, my stomach was twisted all up. He was a guy. He didn't stir, gazing down the road. He was lean and tall, in worn-out black. He was a ghost. But he was. Something. Misplaced. In a sense. He did not stir, he did not call for help. He stood, waiting. Something. I shook with terror. I'll just go on, I told myself. And I turned away from him. Maybe he was a truck driver. Maybe his car had malfunctioned. Rode anyway. My headlamp shining into his eyes for an instant. My heart skipped. He was gray-haired, gray to the teeth, and black-eyed, deeply set in the crown of his head. He was hollow, but a cold, hollow one that sent shivers through me. I floored it, hoping that I might leave him in a blur of fear. I was driving rather fast, but I still felt uneasy. I glanced into the back view mirror constantly, hopefully wanting to see him appear in my rear view mirror. He wasn't in there. He was standing in the middle of the road. I took a gulp of air. I hadn't even noticed him creeping up behind me, and now he stands before me, filling the area along the walkway. Squeal of tires on pavement, racing heartbeat pounding against the cupped shapes of my ribcage. The car halted inches or so from the end of the tip of his pointed nose, and smiled. It wasn't a smile. His lips stretched wide into a grotesque grin, and crooked, yellowing teeth flashed past. Empty eyes slid up with something vile, something unnatural. I backed the car out, raking my fingers through my hair like leaves. But before I'd backed so much as an inch, he was gone. I held the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. My head swirled, trying to make some sort of sense of it all, but there was none. I was so nervous to attempt and look about. There was no sign of him on the road. He wasn't anywhere in the woods. He wasn't anywhere. That's when I could feel it. A presence. It was a reluctant snarl, not wanting to see and know what I was seeing, but I glanced over at the passenger side windshield. He was there. Next to me. Close in, worse only. Ripping out of all sense. Stretched, as if stretching out for man-flesh, but so far failing to obtain it. His eyes thrown over one shoulder in squalid attitude, wishu, eyes clouding with greenish lust. I was paralyzed with terror. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. And then hoarsely, softly, he said, "Drive." I don't recall what happened after that. I must have been in survival mode or something, because I floored it when I made the turn. The car shot off like a bullet, my heart pounding so fast that it was going to burst at any given time. I didn't even look once towards the passenger side. I didn't care where I was headed, I just had to get out of there. I guess I must have blacked out or something, because the next thing I know, I am standing outside of the car, perspiring like crazy, clutching onto the steering wheel for my life. No one was inside the car. I couldn't shake the sense that I was being followed 2 nights in a row. Darkness seemed deeper. Shadows seemed to come to sharp points, and however many times I drove through town and through town again, I'd catch a glimpse of something out of my peripheral vision, and it would be gone as soon as I'd attempt to actually look. And one night, quite without warning, I woke to discover something that was making my spine prickle. A white flash of a hand on the outside of my passenger window. I have not driven home from work in the evening since. I used to think that the phrase "home alone" was equal to freedom. A night of junk food, films, and no one in my face telling me to clean up after myself. All that was taken from me on a stormy night when I was 17. My parents were away for the weekend and I was home alone. It was late, or at least after midnight, and rain drummed the windows with damp fingers. I dozed half asleep on the couch as I watched a horror film, blissfully unaware that my own horror movie was about to start. Halfway through, I heard it, a soft thud upstairs. I froze the movie, cocking an ear in. Wind, I reminded myself, trying to suppress the rising fear that was tickling my spine. I heard it again. Thump. Thump. My heart was racing. The door was closed. I had double-checked. Holding my breath, I picked up the fireplace poker and approached the stairs. The hallway light flickered as I stood on the first step. My bedroom door creaked open a fraction of an inch, a detail I had double-checked that I'd closed it. I gulped down my fear and pushed it open. The room was vacant, but my closet door, typically closed, was partially open. My breathing was strained as I inched closer. Gathering all my nerve, I opened the door. Nothing. Just my clothes and old boxes. I breathed harshly and turned away from my bed and stopped. A smudged, long handprint occupied my pillow. I did not sleep the entire night. I spent the remainder of it in the bathroom clutching the poker until my parents returned home. I never came to know who had come and what they had done. But sometimes during the quiet nighttime, I can still hear some faint thuds above. Each day I received no respite from the fear. I began to notice odd things in the house. Little things, doors slightly ajar when I walked by. Things moved from where I had left them, shadows dancing on the periphery of my vision. I kept reminding myself it was paranoia, but deep inside, I knew better. One night, a week or so after that terrible evening, I was doing homework in the living room when I heard it again. The soft tap, tap, tap upstairs. My stomach curled up. I gripped my pencil tightly in my fist, trying to breathe. And then, as if the universe only waited to reassure me in my worst nightmare that it had happened at last, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text message, from an unfamiliar number. "You look scared." "Don't." I nearly dropped the phone. My head jerked up, my eyes darting across every window, every dark nook of the room. Was someone after me? I fought to bolt every door, shut every blind. My hands shaking, I rattled out a reply. "Who is this?" Nothing came back. The rest of the evening, I huddled in the corner of the room with a kitchen knife clutched in my fist, every muscle in my body taut. But nothing occurred. A few nights later, I was wakened by a sound that ran icy down my veins. Breathing. Not mine, not animal. Slow, measured, just beyond my bedroom door. I wanted to leap up and switch, to yell, but terror froze me in bed. The breathing continued, harsh and labored. And then, a click. My doorknob turning. I clutched my nightstand, my phone. My hands trembled as I reached out to grab 911, but just as I was going to press the call button, the sound ceased. Silence. Hours ticked by. Then minutes. And then dawn broke, and I geared up to open my door. The corridor still remained empty, but on the floor lay something that gave me the chills. A bare, wet footprint, pointing into my closet. That was the night that I never slept alone in that house anymore. Camping was about connecting. My best friend Jake and me in nature. We had the ideal place, deep woods, miles away from civilization. The first day was wonderful. We pitched our tent, made a fire, and stayed up late at night. But there was something off around the fire. It wasn't the creepy feeling you get in the woods. It was even darker, as if the trees were observing us. I woke up at 2 a.m. to sounds in front of the tent. I believed that it was Jake rising to relieve himself, but when I rolled over, he was sleeping. The sounds increased. Footsteps. I picked up my flashlight and crept open the tent. The fire had reduced to coals, providing only a weak glow with which to look. Something. A figure. A skeletal, bony form slumped against the rim of the trees, its arms too long, its head cocked at a strange angle. It did not stir. It just watched. My own breath was trapped in my throat. I shook Jake frantically. When he came to, the figure had disappeared. We hung around for the rest of the night, listened, waited. but there were no more noises. The next day, there were tracks around our campsite, large, long tracks that neither one of us left. We moved out and left as soon as we possibly could, but the route back home did not appear any more secure. Hurtling down the greasy dirt road, still frantically sweeping the side mirror, my paranoia was absolutely certain that something lurked behind us, just out of sight, over the tree line. And then, momentarily, I spotted it. One figure standing near the trees, observing us, become smaller and smaller. Jake would never discuss it later. I dropped it, but in the back of my head, I felt like we had witnessed something that we shouldn't have.